Sitting alone with my head on the phone, thinking of you till it hurts. I know you hurt too, but what else can we do? Jump into that dawn and fall. I wish I could carry your smile on my heart. The times when my life seems so low, it would make me believe what tomorrow could bring, when today doesn't really know, doesn't really know. I'm all out of love, I'm so lost without you. I know you were right, leaving so long. I'm all out of love, what am I without you? I can't be too late to say that I was so wrong. I want you to come back and carry me home. We brought me long, lonely nights. I'm watching for you, are you feeling it too? That's the fancy ocean road. What would you say if I called on you now and said that I can't hold on? There's no easy way if you're tired each day. You love me all, I'll be gone. I'll be gone. I'm so lost without you. I know you were right. Being so long, I'm all out of love. What am I without you? I can't be too late to say that I was so wrong. Oh, what are you thinking of? What are you thinking of? What are you thinking of? What are you thinking Hey, you know the camera's running? You're on camera. You're on camera. Say hi. The camera's up here. Hello. I'm so lost without you. A weird camera. Get up, come back, and now you're. I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. Out of focus. I know you were right. Believe so long. I'm all out of love. Whatever without you, I can't be too late. I know I was so wrong. I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. I know you were right. Believe so long. I'm all out of love. Whatever without you, I can't be too late. I know I was so wrong. Magic.
Well, I had to stick around long enough to hear the end of the applause for Air Supply. The name of the song is All Out of Love. And these two guys are really good. They're probably in their 70s singing this song, but they still got the chops to do it. So they're pretty impressive. Okay. First of all, welcome back. Today is Thursday, the 4th of March. I was going to look up the Ides of March. I couldn't remember what day it is, so maybe one of you can do that, figure out what day the Ides of March falls upon. Anyway, we were discussing child abuse, and Victoria is going to join us this morning. Good morning, Victoria. Can you hear me okay? Hooking up to audio. Okay. Now, Victoria, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Welcome this morning. I believe we were talking about child abuse. We were either talking about it or that's the last page I left, and I was going to talk about it today. So I'll talk about it a little bit today because I spent about 6 years of my life as a child abuse and neglect investigator, Child Protective Services for the Department of Children and Family Services in the state of Illinois. And this is after my time at the mental hospital and being the psychologist for the juvenile court. So, believe it or not, I left. I left the job at the mental health center, not the mental health hospital, but the mental health center, because the child abuse position paid a lot better. And at that time, I had tried to tell a story, and then it has all these other parts to it. But let me just say, one of the effects of having ADHD for a lot of people who have it, not all, but for a lot, we really feel extremely strong about fairness, and it might have something to do with the attachment style too, now I think about it. But at any rate, some of us really have this sense of fairness, that things need to be fair. They can be hard, but as long as they're fair, then we can accept it. And getting back on the 4 types of parenting style, that is one of the big differences between the authoritative and the authoritarian. The authoritative can be strict, but it's fair in the sense of the parents are going to listen to what the child's position is, and they might be willing to change to show some flexibility, where the authoritarian does not show any flexibility because they perceive that being flexible is a sign of weakness, and so they are not going to listen more than likely, they're not going to listen to whatever you have to say anyway. I don't care. I said it. It's my way, the highway. Shut up. Something like that. But even if they will allow you to have a few words in, it's not going to change their position. So in this particular job, after 6 months, I was, see, how was it? Yeah, after 6 months, I was evaluated, and it was an excellent evaluation. Everybody was happy with the job I was doing. And I said, okay, well, I'm looking for some upward movement in this job. When are we going to talk about salary increase? And he said, well, we usually do this at this time of year. So when that comes up, I'll make the recommendation I'm talking to the clinical director. I'll make the recommendation to the executive director, and you will either get a 5% raise, or if, depending on, what the financial situation is, up to a 7% raise. So I'm thinking, wow, great. Guess I'll hang around, right? So when that meeting occurred, a couple months later, or more than that, anyway, whenever it happened, I went to the executive. I went to the clinical director, and I said, hey, what's the story on salary increases? And he said, well, I talked to Fred about it, and we just haven't been getting the financial support that we need for this agency. It's a community mental health center. And we're not going to be doing raises now because we can't do it budgetary. And I said, Nick, this was a promise you made. Minimum 5%, up to 7. Okay, I got it. No 7, but you made a commitment, a firm commitment, and I made, I clarified it. And to me, this is a broken commitment. Well, so I was really pissed. And a friend of mine who was a social worker, and I had met her at the mental health center because she was doing her externship there. And she came to my office and said, hey, did you hear that DCFS got some funds to impact their child protective services? And I said, no, I wasn't aware of that. She said, well, that they're hiring, you should go apply. And I said, well, hell yes, I'll go apply. And I forgot to tell you this part. This is my personality, of course. I told Nick, I said, look, dude, you broke your commitment. This was a commitment. This was an oral contract, and you violated it. So I said, I don't feel very obliged to continue working here under these circumstances. And he laughed at me. He said, you think it's easy to find a job in social services? Hey, be my guest, have at it. And 2 weeks later, I had interviewed the job and I'd gotten the job. So 2 weeks later, I came in and said, okay, I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice. I'm out of here. And the look on his face was like, and I went over there and I really enjoyed that job. I mean, some people say, how could you be an investigator and deal with these people who beat and burn and sexually abuse and blah, blah, blah. And of course, I said, look, if you're child-centered and you want to do something for the child, you got to work within the system. Maybe that means a referral to the district attorney to get this mom or dad criminal charges against them, or maybe it's enough to refer these people into our agency and to the other side of our agency that does child welfare, which is basically an ongoing relationship with a family that needs assistance. And so I did rise in that organization. I eventually became the intake worker who was taking all the calls and separating them and figuring out who's going to get what calls based on their work schedule and all that stuff. And then if calls were kind of simple, then maybe I would just do it so that people wouldn't have to take off of their caseload that they already had to do some kind of silly case that just needed to have certain interviews done and things. So, and then of course, I was also in a position if there was a real interesting case, then I could assign myself to it, which I did on occasion. So, I can't remember whether I talked about this or not. I do believe I talked about that abused children are at a higher risk of maltreating their own children once they grow up as adults. And then this statement down here at the bottom just shows that our author doesn't have enough experience to understand the legal system. Her statement is, the very last one on the page is, judges do not have the power to punish abusive parents, but they can place the children in foster care and limit or terminate parental rights. Well, they can certainly take the custody of the child away from the parents and give it to us, Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, and then we put the child in a foster home, and sometimes termination of parental rights occurs. Sometimes, most of the time, it doesn't. But they can do a lot of things. When I was doing therapy with kids that were incarcerated in the jail, juvenile jail, the judge would order them to, well, they didn't have to be in jail. Some that were just in a day program, the judge would order them to attend therapy if I did a psychological workup on them and decided they could benefit from therapy. And some parents didn't want to go. So it's sort of like the stories you hear about students that cut class and are always truant, and the principal calls the parents in and says, or the truant officer calls them in and said, hey, look, little Jimmy's cutting class, and well, I bring him to school and he gets out, and what he does after that is on you. And so the school says, well, look, this is what the law is. If this kid doesn't come to class, then we're going to file charges against you. And well, I can't make them do anything, so gets into this deal. And sometimes parents go to jail. Sometimes parents get fined. So disavow yourself that if you're working with a kid and it gets involved in the court system, that the court is not going to be able to do anything about the parents. That's crazy. The juvenile court systems are a lot different than adult court systems, and there's a lot of leeway, a lot of flexibility. And so the way the judges get away with it is they order you in court, you will attend therapy with Mr. Neal at the mental health center, and if you don't, he's going to come back here and tell me that you didn't, and then I'm going to issue a bench warrant for your arrest. And he did that, this particular judge in Sangamon County, the juvenile court judge. But that's when I was an investigator. But when I was an attorney in Albuquerque, I had clients that were juveniles, and we used to butt heads with the court system. And the issue for me, and continues to be, fairness. You know, you're going to punish somebody, punish people fairly. And I can tell you for the rest of the day here, making a very, very long film about many, many incidents of unfairness in the legal system, which is one of the reasons I'm not in it anymore. I kind of had my fill. So, and the same way I'm looking at this divorce stuff, same way in divorce court. Divorce court judges have a lot of leeway to do a lot of things, including ordering people to go to therapy, ordering people to move out of the house. I had a client, I'll never forget this guy. He ran a painting company in Albuquerque, and it was very profitable. He had a nice house and nice equipment, had a slew of employees, wasn't that old. And he went to a domestic violence, you could call it a court hearing. It's really somebody who's not a judge, but they're a hearing officer that listens to the facts of the case and makes a decision. This particular hearing officer kicked him out of his own house. His girlfriend was living with him, and she hadn't been living with him that long. And then this incident of domestic violence occurred, and she ordered him to get out of the house for a month, and he couldn't come back to the property. And on his property, he had a huge garage that had some of his painting equipment in there, and she ordered him stuff. Should have thought of that before you got involved in domestic violence. And those orders, even though they're just a hearing officer, those orders go to a district court judge who does have the authority to tell you these things. And then if you don't do what they tell you to do, the district court judge will tell you, okay, I've got the report from the hearing officer, this is what we're going to do, and I'm ordering you to follow that. You understand, no contact, I don't care, personally, letters, carrier pigeons, have your cousin Leroy call, none of that, no contact. Well, that's all good. But then to tell a guy, you got to move out of your own house for a month, you don't have access to some of your equipment, and that's too bad. You just have to suck it up for a month. And to make matters worse, during that month, the girlfriend, this is out in the rural area, by the way, in Bernalillo County, and she calls the sheriff's department and says that he broke the restraining order not to be around her because he came by about 2 a.m. and drove his truck by, and he has a very distinctive muffler sound. And I know it was him because I heard him drive by. Did you see him? No. Did you see the truck? No. Well, how do you know it's him? Because of that muffler noise. Well, how do you know he was driving? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Dispatcher takes the case. Deputies go find him the next day at work, arrest him for violation of the restraining order done by a district court judge. And you can't get out because it's a non-bondable offense, because it's considered a violation of a court order. So it's contempt of court. And that's what juvenile court judges do. They charge the person with contempt of court. Me being a judge, I urge you to do something, you didn't do it, then I'm going to put you in jail. It has nothing to do with juvenile court law, has nothing to do with domestic violence law, has to do with you not doing what I told you to do. So anybody who would write a statement, judges don't have the power to punish abusive parents, just doesn't know a damn thing about the judicial system and shouldn't be commenting on it without consulting somebody who does know. So anyway, had to disabuse you of that bad information. Fake news, I guess. It's almost as silly as saying divorce is a fairly conflict-free those that are conflict free. Yeah. Well, how many of those are conflict free? There is a statement about psychoanalytical theory down here that courts have a tendency to give custody to the mother in a divorce proceeding if the kid is of tender years doctrine, which is usually considered like under 12. So if you have an infant, 3 or 4 or 5 or something, there's literally zero chance that a dad is going to get custody of the kid. They can get visitation, but they're not going to get custody. The only way they're going to get custody is if the mom's done something like child abuse, neglect. Then that could happen. But in the absence of that, it's just a run-of-the-mill divorce. And I am in a better position. I'm the breadwinner. I have the house. She's out of the house. She's living with her mom now, blah, blah, blah. You're not getting anywhere. Courts are going to give the mom custody. And then after the divorce, she'll have permanent custody unless there's some big issue that pops up. So if all things are equal, good dad, good mom, bad dad, bad mom, the kid's going to mom. So just to let you know that. Okay, now on to what is behind me, which is the bell curve. Now, some of you may have heard of the term bell curve. If you're in a classroom and some fellow student of yours raises their hand and says, "Hey, mister, do you grade on the curve?" Some of you probably been in a situation where either the professor says, "I do grade on the curve," or "I don't grade on the curve." This is the curve they're talking about. And what is the curve? A normal bell-shaped curve. It is a statistical analysis. If you take 1,000, whatever you're taking, 1,000 people, 1,000 scores, 1,000 whatever, if it fits into a bell curve, and that depends on what you're measuring, because not all things fit into a bell curve, because the area underneath, see if I can do this. All this area underneath the curve, this is where your data would be. If you were data, putting on a plot, a dot for every piece of data that you had, this is what makes the curve. You have some data here on let's see, I can't, this end and that end. You see the data underneath that curve is very, very small. The most data is right in the middle. That middle line right above my head there, right there, that's where most of the people's answers or dots are. And then it thins out as it goes out. This is a perfect bell curve. So when they say, "I'm grading on a curve," what they say is, there are people at the bottom of the curve who make a D or an F. And then there are people, if I can get my head out of the way, at the upper level who make 100%. And most of us are somewhere in the middle. So if you grade on a curve, what's the highest grade you can get on a test? 100. So 100 is to the far, on your picture, the far right, and the low is on this side, which is the far left. So if you made 100 on an exam and it was a perfect bell curve, your grade would be over here. So when you grade on the curve, nobody made an A. I mean, nobody made 100. So what grading on the curve means is you say, okay, what was the highest grade? Oh, the highest grade was a an 85. So they say, okay, well, this is an 85. So grading on the curve means this line right here is actually moved over here. And so the bell curve shifts to your left. So what would have been an 85 is now 100. So this figure gets shifted to the right. And so now a perfect paper really is 85. So if you made a 79 on the original bell curve of 100, you know that's a C. But when you grade on the curve, you move the curve over, and your 79 is only 6 points below an 85, which is the highest score. So you've gone from a 79C to a 94A because the numerical number to begin with was 85. So that's now your 100 spot. So how far are you away from the 100 spot? 6 points. So 94. So that's why people, because sometimes tests are given, professors sometimes do this, their tests are so hard that people can't get an A on them, especially if you're in like the hard sciences, like biology and chemistry and those kinds of classes. A lot of those instructors, they want to challenge you. So they give you these tests that are really hard. And if they grade on the curve, then what they'll do is take whoever's in the class that scores the highest grade, that becomes the 100, and then everybody shifts over. That's great, unless you have somebody who's really smart and they make 100 on the test, nothing changes. You still got a 79, you got a C. And then there's plenty of teachers who don't do the grade on the curve, and so you just get what you get. Okay, so intelligence falls underneath this bell curve, which just sort of fits my head there. That's kind of cool. Maybe I can move back. Yeah, move it up, move it around. Okay. All right. So the people on this side are low intelligence. The people on this side would be high intelligence. And this is the middle. This is called the mean. And of course, it's the median and it's the mode. All three of those statistical measures on a bell curve is right in the middle. On other curves, it's different places. The mean is in the middle, meaning if there were 1,000 test scores, 500 of them would be on this side, and 500 of them would be on this side. That's what that means. So 100 is in the middle. So 100 is considered the exact middle and normal intelligence. But 15 points to the left, which is this first line, or 15 points to the right, which is this line, is also normal. So if you score an 85, then you would know that 15 taken away from 100 is 85. Or said differently, 85 plus 15 gets you to 100. On the other side of the equation, if you are at that first line, which is for all you statistics folks knows, is the standard deviation, that's 15 points. And so that score is 115. So between 85 and 115 is what is considered normal intelligence. Okay, so as you go further to your right, then the next line is going to be 15 points more. So that would be 130. And then the next line would be 15 points more, which is 145, and so on until you get off the chart. And there are people who score so high, they're off the chart. Same thing on the other side. Your first 15 point drop is 100 to 85. The next one, which of course is this line, and then the next line is this one, and you can see the scores underneath there. This is a 70. This is important because intellectual disability occurs at the magic number of 70. We used to call that mentally retarded. So that was determined to be politically upsetting to people, so we no longer use mentally retarded. When I was working in the mental hospital, it was called developmentally delayed, which means their developmental growth was below their age group. And they thought that was more politically correct because it wasn't saying, look, your kid's retarded, that's it. They're not going to grow anything beyond 65, 55, whatever it is. They want to give a little bit of hope and say, well, today your kid is 67, but he or she could, with assistance, could get over that 70 and maybe, up to 75 or something. That, of course, is all crap. You do not increase your intelligence. Your intelligence quotient is what it is. Now, can you become smarter? Yes. How do you become smarter? Well, you read more, you learn more. It doesn't increase your intelligence. It increases the amount of things that you know. So your academic side is increased, but your intelligence, if it was tested correctly, is not going to change more than 2 or 3, 4 points, which is meaningless throughout your life. So if I tested you today and you're 20, and I tested you when you're 30, 40, 50, and 60, aside from having some kind of injury or illness that affected your brain, you would be the same intelligence. So that you need to understand as well. Belsky says something that, I guess because she's a developmental psychologist and not a clinical psychologist, she says, traditional intelligence tests called intelligence quotient or IQ measure only academic abilities. Well, depends on how you define academic abilities. Because when people think of academic abilities, they usually think of academic achievement, and achievement is not intelligence. So she mentions in the book, intelligence quotient, measured designed to evaluate a child's overall cognitive ability. Correct. On general aptitude for mastering academic work. Depends on what you say academic work is. I think she should have just left that out. Then that is to be contrasted to achievement test, measures that evaluate a child's knowledge in specific school-related areas. Well, it doesn't have to be school-related. It's achievement. Achievement is achievement. If you've achieved great things in music, great things in architectural design, well, they may not be school-related subjects, but you have high achievement. People, she says, people who have high intelligence, but their performance is way below what your expectation would be because of their intellect, that they have a specific learning disorder. For instance, something like dyslexia, or maybe a hearing problem or a sight problem that's affecting your ability to progress in a normal progression that you would in an academic setting. And that brings me to Jeannie. Jeannie was a child that was reported to have been neglected or abused, and the Child Protective Services of California intervened. And at the time, she was around 12 years old and strapped to essentially a potty chair so that the chair would catch her poop and pee. And she was left in a room where she couldn't move out of the chair because she was strapped in it. Had one window, and the window was almost all the way covered except for 5 or 6 inches at the top. Meanwhile, her brother and her 2 parents are running around the house like she didn't exist. So when she was found, of course, she was taken into custody, and she couldn't talk. She just grunted. And since they were in a college town, one of the university systems in California, she went to a children's hospital there, and they, treated her for whatever physical problems that she had, and she had some because she, her muscles and all that physical problems that occur when you can't get out of a chair. You've just been in there for the first 12 years of your life, or who knows what happened when she was 0 to 1 or something. But regardless, she was messed up. Sometimes we call these children feral, F-E-R-A-L, like a feral cat or a feral dog, which is an animal which is normally domesticated breed, but yet they grew up outside, outdoors, so they don't deal with people very well. And there's all sorts of problems with feral cats and feral dogs. In fact, we have feral pigs here in Texas, which used to be domesticated, regular, food hogs that were grown, but then they get out in the wild and they start changing and they look more like wild boars or something. And the other thing people call them are like wild child. And so you have a drop-down box on your blackboard named Jeannie. And in there is an article and a excellent video. Like a lot of things in life, it's a bittersweet story. It's a horrible story that she was abused that way. But then when she got rescued, it became a really great story. She started learning to talk. She started ambulating, moving around better. She still had a obvious odd way of walking and talking, but she could only learn a certain number of words. So her vocabulary was limited. I don't remember what the number of words that she could learn, but it was fairly limited. And she had problems putting sentences together. And of course, her emotional portion of her was quite understandably messed up. So the university sort of that was associated with the hospital, Children's Hospital, sort of took her under their wing, and then they were all excited by the fact that we had never seen, we have heard of, because there's other children that have been left in the woods or something and somehow made it to a certain part of their life, and then they were found. If you watch that video, hopefully you will, it talks about a guy who's in Europe, and they did a sort of a documentary on him as well. But the point is, they were very, very interested in all the aspects of Jeannie, especially the language acquisition, because we didn't necessarily believe it then, but we do believe it now, that there is a window of opportunity for you to learn language. Most psychologists agree that humans are predisposed to communicate. It is a need. It is, Freud would call it a drive, an id part of our natural genetic and historical buildup in our bodies at the time of birth. And it is a very well-developed system, which is how we learn to speak. And as you know from previous chapters, speech is one of the things that differentiates us from all other species, because we have very good communication skills, and other species have some communication ability, but it's limited. The cat this morning decided to jump up in my chair that I'm sitting in. Didn't realize the camera was running, because she gets a little camera shy, and started to exert her dominance in my chair and start talking with me. So if you got this far in the video, you obviously saw that little interchange. So, and by the way, she was a feral cat. We got her off the street, but we got her when she was really young, like maybe 3 weeks old. And in the beginning, she had some real problems with humans, but then eventually warmed up to us, and now she's she was what we would call a successfully attached cat being. So she's a happy child. Okay. So you can't increase your intelligence. You can increase your knowledge, you can increase your skills, your academic achievements, but you don't increase your intelligence. Can you do something that will decrease your intelligence? The answer to that is yes. You can have some kind of accident or disease, infection that can affect your brain and affect your intelligence. I think we talked about Down syndrome when we were talking about genetics, and the 13th gene pair in your DNA out of your 26 is messed up, and you have 3 segments of DNA material instead of just 2. So instead of a pair hooked up in the middle in that double helix, you've got 3 that are somehow together. And that ends up with you having Down syndrome, which does affect your intelligence. You are going to be 70 or below with Down syndrome. Some are severely disabled. And if you talk about something like 55, which is, well, is that, speaking of math, that is the next stay 9, the next standard deviation, 55 after 70. You add 15 to 55 and you get 70. So the next standard deviation below 70, which is the disabled point, at 55, you can't talk. You can't even hold your head up. You're usually strapped in a chair. I don't mean to be demeaning to anybody, but that's the physical state of disability and mental disability that you're at. If you attended a elementary school here in El Paso, it's very likely you might have met students like that because many of them attend a regular school, and they're all in chairs and they're usually strapped down because they don't want their hands flailing and getting caught into the whatever. So very little intellectual chance of knowing anything. At the mental hospital I worked at, we did have an intellectually disabled kids. I didn't work with them. Very, very demanding work, and the rewards, the changes that you see in a kid are really, really small. Some people find it very rewarding because they're giving to a really needy child, and minimally they are having this human contact with the kid and being positive, and just that is a gift to this child. So as they go through their life, at least they've had some good opportunity to build some kind of positive view of their world. So, and then there's lots of stories of Down syndrome kids, which are closer to 70, who, go to school. They're not going to be tackling community college classes, but they can learn. They can sometimes do very interesting things, and they're usually very, very nice people. Something about us who have greater than 70 IQ that we're the ones who can be mean and upset and depressed and all this stuff, where some of these kids, or when they're adults, they just have a happy disposition. You could argue, well, that's because they don't know the future. They don't project into the future. And that's right. They don't sit in their chair and go, wow, I'm mentally challenged and I'm going to be mentally challenged my entire life. So I guess I might as well just give up, get depressed or whatever. They get up, get excited the next day, get excited to see you, work with them. And so there's some really great rewards working with those kids. I don't personally, I don't have the patience to deal with them. You have to be kind of very directive when you're around like adults that are disabled like that. I don't even want to get into that conversation, but it takes a special person to work with them, that's for sure. I can't remember whether I gave you a diagram of Gardner's 9 different types of intelligences. If I did, I didn't see it in the file here, so I think I might have given it to you prior. I'll add that too. Maybe I put it in there. Anyway, there's a psychologist by the name of Howard Gardner, not to be confused with Richard Gardner, who was the mutual storytelling. And he talks about 9 different intelligences. And if I fail to post that, I will post it right after we're done here. And he started off with 8, and then he added the 9th one. And so he said you have the G intelligence, which Spearman came up with, G intelligence, G being general intelligence, which sort of underpins all these specialty intelligences. And, you know, I can go for that. Most people would agree with that. But Gardner went on to say, hey, wait a minute. There are people who, like, for instance, they have verbal linguistic intelligence. Well, what does that mean? Well, the capacity to use language to express what's on your mind and to understand other people, usually multilingual type people as well. How about logical mathematics? The ability to understand the underlying principles of some kinds of causal systems, mathematics, equations, physics, chemistry, certain biology issues. They're all in this logic and mathematics. Then you have visual spatial, the ability to present the spatial world, if I'm saying that right, spatial as in depicting what's in the world, 3D, whatever, not like the church lady used to say on Saturday Night Live, isn't that spatial? No, that's special with an accent. This is spatial with no accent. Then here's one you might relate to, music or rhythmic. People who have this tremendous skill to play an instrument or usually several instruments or understand, have perfect pitch, all these kinds of things. The next one, bodily kinetic, which is movement. So kinesiology, which some of you might be a kinesiology major, it has to do with movement. So people who are like dancers, whether they're any kind of dance, whether they're ballet dancers or contemporary or folk dancers, folklore, all this kind of movement stuff and knowing where your body is and how to make your hands and arms and legs do what the choreographer is wanting you to do. Now this one's kind of a weird one. Naturalistic, just sort of somebody who can really understand plants, rocks, and trees and look at the differences and be able to be very tuned into the differences in our world. Now here's two that you do know about. Intrapersonal and interpersonal. Intrapersonal, TRA, intra, is somebody who understands themselves, somebody who does a lot of self-exploration, knows about themselves, and comes up with a good assessment of who they are, what they are, where they're headed, what they want, what they don't like, blah, blah, blah. That's intrapersonal. And then you have interpersonal, T-E-R-I-N-T-E-R, personal. That makes sense. That person who has interpersonal skills, they have the ability to communicate, they listen well. You know, you think about it, an interstate highway system, it connects all the 50 states. Well, not all, because Hawaii and, well, you can go to Anchorage, but you can't drive to, you can't drive to Hawaii, even though the people who are all into climate change is wanting to wipe out combustion engines, you know. Okay, all right, no combustion engine. So how are we going to get to Hawaii? Going to have sun catchers up on the wings of an aircraft, you know, or it's going to be wind powered, you know, solar powered, wind powered. Another discussion. Then the last one he added was called existential. To exhibit the proclivity, I love that word, proclivity, which means the ability, the sign of inborn ability, proclivity, to pose and ponder questions about life, death, and ultimate realities. So people who are existential, just like the word existential means here and now, you know, the COVID-19 is an existential threat to us today, even though we don't have to wear a mask coming next Wednesday, 10th, right? Yeah, Wednesday the 10th. Yay! We don't have to wear a mask anymore. But of course, if a store or a restaurant wants you to wear a mask, then you're going to have to wear a mask. And if you don't want to wear a mask, then vete, go to another restaurant or setting. Those of you who are wondering whether we're going to have in-class classes in fall, I'm very optimistic. I believe we're going to hit herd immunity for the virus, COVID-19, by next month. And so the changes that Governor Abbott made makes sense, following the science and not the politics. Politics said, oh, we got to close all the schools and continue with online Zoom because all of you love Zoom classes so much. Thank you, Victoria. Nobody else is here. Zoom classes are a lot better than just taking the material and throwing it on Blackboard saying, hey, test is Friday. That's it. I'm not willing to do that. So I need to tell you about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Pretty much the same thing as same concept of interpersonal and intrapersonal. Intrinsic motivation is something that's inside of you, that's burning, driving you to do what you want to do, and you do it. External motivation is what could happen if you look at the biopsychosocial. On the social side, and of course a little bit on the psych side, how your environment motivates you to do things. Like you may have a job today. It may be in the service industry. It might be in the food industry. I don't want to work in retail. I don't want to work at a food location, but I want to eat. So I need money, and in order for me to get money, then I will work in retail, or then I will work at a burger joint or a restaurant because I am externally motivated to do that because I need money to satisfy some of my internal desires, like eating and buying things online or whatever the situation is, entertainment. Alrighty. There's a statement about, I'll read it to you. Therefore, providing autonomy, which means giving choices, and fostering relevance, pointing to the importance of an activity to that person's goal, benefits both students and teachers or instructors. That's what I try to do. I try to say, okay, here is the goal of what we're trying to do this week. Answer these questions that are coming up tomorrow, and that'll get you your higher grade and your GPA and all that stuff in the future. And then try to point to why whatever we're doing is important in our career or in our personal life. So if you don't think there's any relevancy to this class, like there's nothing in here that's of any value to me, I'm not going to work with children, whatever. Well, we're dealing with children now, but later on we're going to be dealing with adults and older people, middle-aged, old people. And you're going to be around kids. Even if you're not working with kids, you can be around kids. Even if you're not going to be around older people, you can have appreciation for them. So That's why I post some of the stuff in news you can use. That's why I posted that video on Jeannie. You really all should watch that because it it is very, very informative, and it also tells you when you're a academic researcher in a university like the University of California, and you're trying to do two things at once. You're trying to therapeutically intervene with Jeannie, who's been so devastated because of the first 12 years of her life. But then you're also, because you have this unique experience with a child, an opportunity to learn how much you can push them learning new words and sentences and learning how to speak at an older age like that. It's called the forbidden experiment, because you could never do this experiment in real life. It would be horribly, horribly, criminally abusive of child to say, well, we're going to neglect this child for 12 years and then see what we can teach him after we've neglected him for 12 years. You just can't do that. You can't do that. So you can imagine the energy that was created when they found Jeannie, which is, of course, not a real name. There is just some powerful, powerful things that happen in that movie, that talking about her life. And one of them which sticks with me is often we talk about, or at least I talk about, how a person's appearance, whether they're attractive or unattractive, or how, whether they speak well or dress well, or all these things which will factor into their personal relationships. Where here you got a girl, Jeannie, who in the beginning looks a little rough, but as she gets older, she is, an attractive young girl. Does that help? Yes, it does. If she was a really fail, ugly, child, it would have, I'm telling you, it would affect the amount of energy that somebody wanted to put into him to work with him. Oh, that's cruel. That's terrible. Yes, it is. But is it true? Yes, it is. So she had that going for her. And what she had, which is what I'm getting to now, what she really had that really made a big difference is she had a kind of unspoken ability to engage people. When people looked at her and were in her presence, it was like, a light to the moths. They were drawn to her. And when people are drawn to you to be helpful, that is really a good situation to be in. And here's an example that'll just, I don't know, for me, just blew me away. She was, I don't know, probably the younger part of her, 13 or something, 12, 13, when they first got her. Well, not first got her, but when they were able to take her out, and she was living with these psychologists, right? So, which is a whole nother story. I'll leave that one for you to watch. It's amazing. And it's not particularly good, amazing. And they were taking her around where she lived and, showing her sights like you would with any other kid. And they happened to go by a toy store. And there was a father with his son, which was around her age, which would have been, well, maybe a little bit younger, maybe 10, 11, somewhere around there. And he, we find out later, had been working towards getting this big model of a fire truck. So it was a truck he could play with. It was something he talked about. He worked on it. Maybe his parents put him on a behavioral modification program and given him tokens or whatever to get this damn fire truck that he wanted. So this kid finally gets a chance to go to the toy store, gets the toy, can I wrap it up? No, give it to me now. I want to hold that sucker. I want to look at it. I want to smell it. You know, it's great. So he's got it in his arms and he walks out of the toy store and it's like, wow, look at this, man. I've wanted this for weeks and weeks or whatever. He looks up and he sees Jeannie, who, by the way, of course, is not very communicative. He looks at her, she looks at him. And he walks over and gives her the truck. And you say to yourself, what a kind-hearted kid. Gave away something he wanted really, really bad. And within seconds, he saw the look in Jeannie's eye and the way she looked at that truck. And he walked over to it and gave it to her. Now, that has about as much to do with Jeannie being successful in progressing in her developmental stage. But she hit a ceiling because of the lack of her verbal skills and her ability to learn words. Yeah, she learned a lot of words, more than she had in the beginning, which was probably none. But she hit a peak. So no matter what they did with her, I mean, she saw every kind of therapist in the world: speech therapist, physical therapist, obviously a psychological therapist, occupational therapist, all these people working with her. She had the best in the world. They got all these hundreds of thousands of dollars from the National Institute of Mental Health to help her and study her so that others could learn from the experience of Jeannie. And, you know, that sort of got into a ethical dilemma. You're trying to be helping a child, but yet you got her under the microscope like an amoeba, and you're trying to figure out, you know, what makes her tick. Certainly there's value in learning that, but as you'll see in the video, when she became adult, she went back with her mom for a while, and her mom ended up suing all the therapists and the med school and all that was associated with her help. And I don't know what the result was, but I do know that she wanted to go back with her mom. Her mom, of course, was not well. And so as an adult, because at age 18, of course, she could make some decisions for herself. And she said she wanted to go back with her mom. So she did, and it didn't last very long because obviously her mother has got some tremendous deficiencies. And so then she had to be taken by the state again, this time as an adult protective service, not a child protective service. And then it just went downhill from there. She went into foster care, and the psychologist who she'd been living with, that turned out to, in my opinion, turned out to be a pretty poor decision by those psychologists. They were like, oh yeah, we'll take her in so we can study her, i.e. get all this money from NIMH. And then when NIMH cut off the funding because they weren't really doing good research and not documenting it well, then they said, oh, well, we don't want her anymore. So that's pathetic, really pathetic. All right, so enough of that emotional stuff. And let's get on to answering any questions you might have. So our star student, Victoria, is here. And so I'm going to ask you, Victoria, do you have any questions about any of the questions on the study guide?
Let me check.
And I'll remind all you viewers, we are going to have another session tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So if you haven't completed your study guide, so you don't really know what questions you have, you'll have another chance to do it tomorrow at 10. And as always, you'll have the whole weekend to take the test, so let's not get behind. And then you have to make things up, and that's really difficult. Did you find anything, Victoria?
22 and 23.
Oh, good. Okay. These are both questions about Bomrim's parenting style. So number 22 reads like this: which is not a bottom line message of the text parenting styles discussion? This is one of those negative questions. And you know, as much as you dislike these, which you probably do, I don't like not questions. You know, it's negative, you know, keep it in the positive. But they do that on purpose because they're trying to fool with your mind. And the reason I say it's good that you learn how to do that, because you'll see these kinds of questions, these not questions, in the future when you take certain exams for licensure or admission into graduate school of any sort, whether it's med school, law school, nurse practitioner school, any of those kinds of things where you have to take tests for admissions, because they are assessing your intellectual and also your academic at the same time, even though they're not true intelligence tests. If you have a high intelligence, you have a tendency to do well in those tests because you're smart. But you can also do well on the test because you have achieved a lot, you studied a lot. I'll re-emphasize the fact, if you have those kinds of tests that you have to take to get in as an entrance criteria for you to get into a medical school or whatever the situation is, take the review class, because you practice the way the forms of the questions are asked. It makes you think in ways that you haven't thought about. It's not something you do. It's like, you know, you talk about essential classes. Okay, you took trigonometry, you took college algebra. Did you ever use it? Of course, you're young, but if you're my age, answer the question. Have you ever used things you learned in trigonometry? I would say, yes, I actually have. I was a combat engineer in the military, and we had to do figures and learn how to blow up things and build things. And yes, that was helpful. But algebra, really? No, I never needed to use an algebraic equation at all, ever. But we had to take it. I stopped at calculus. I did not take calculus. And I like math. I had no problem with math, but I figured, olvídalo, forget it. Okay, what's the bottom line message here? Well, let's look at A. Parenting styles can vary from child to child. Yeah, that's true. B, parenting styles differ depending on the environment. Well, that's one of those weasel questions. If you ask it, can the environment affect a parenting style? The answer is yes. But if you ask the question this way, or the answer stem is this way, parenting styles differ depending on the environment, that you don't have enough information. If they said parenting styles differ depending on the environment because parents adjust their parental style based on threats or whatever, okay, yeah. But written this way, parenting styles differ depending on the environment. No, if you're authoritarian, you're going to be authoritarian in city A or city B or state C or state D. Doesn't make any difference. So that's a stupid answer, so it's not there. 22C, authoritarian parents are happy with their child rearing. Wrong. If you watch the video, you know it's like, parents have to make their kids suffer because that's what's going to be good. And nobody likes suffering. It's stupid. And so, D, in the US today, it's best to offer children lots of love. Okay, now remember, this is a negative question. So, is A true? Yes. Is B true? Yes. Is D true? Yes. So that leaves C, which is not true. Authoritarian parents are not happy. So that's the question they're looking for because it's a negative question. I generally try to leave those off of a test because they do tend to trick your mind. I'm not trying to play games with anybody. Next one is another not question, which is not a take-home message. All right. A, parents vary their style from child to child. Is that true? Yes, it is. So that ain't the answer. How about B? Parent styles vary depending on their environment. Well, let's hope so. That's true. So that's not the answer. How about C? Understanding the parent's situation and thinking before judging their child rearing. That's an important concept. Before you make a judgmental decision about parents and their child, you need to have some information about the background of that child and parents. We got hordes today. We have hordes of children crossing the border into Texas and to Mexico and Arizona, California. Where are they from? Central America. El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala. Their parenting style is probably a lot different than ours because they live in crap hole countries where there's a lot of conflict, there's government overthrows, military abuses, and you can't let your children just play outside and ride their bicycle into town and get some milk or something, because in a lot of those situations, their child's life might be in danger. So the fact that parents who are coming to the US with their kids to live here instead of where they were, they may have different parenting styles than we do, more protective, more restrictive, more authoritarian than authoritative. But again, just like answer stem B, parent styles vary depending on the environment. That environment in Honduras is completely unlike the environment here. So keep those in mind. Excellent questions, Victoria. Do you have any others? All right, well, if you think of one, I'm going to just sort of slide through some of these questions. Number 3, which U.S. child is most likely to live in poverty? How about Andrew, who's raised by a single mother? Absolutely, that would be the number 1. Number 8 is a good test question. According to parenting styles framework, parents are classified along 2 dimensions. 1, are they rule directed? Or 2, are they child-centered directed? So the answer to 8 is A. That is a good question. It looks like the rest of these on here are all questions about parenting styles. With the book and the handout, you should be able to do fine answering those questions. Number 15, I highlighted this one because of a couple reasons. 15 reads like this: which parenting inconsistency is the worst for a child's well-being? This has to do with, obviously, parenting style. And the answer is the parents' household rules are unpredictably, they're inconsistent, they change, and the child doesn't know what's going on. The reason I highlighted that is sometimes when we talk about mental illness in children, and I ask the rhetorical question, do you think we could make some child mentally ill if they weren't predisposed to be mentally ill? And I go through a little question and answer. You know, if I beat the kid every day, would it make him mentally ill? If I beat the kid only on Fridays when I get paid and get drunk, come home, beat my wife and my kid, is that going to make him schizophrenic? If I do this, if I do that, or whatever. And anyway, I can go through a whole bunch of scenarios. If somebody sexually abuses some child, is that going to make them psychotic, schizophrenic? No. But can we do it? Probably. What's the quickest way of doing it? Is the same answer: B. The parents, their caretakers, are completely inconsistent with the way they treat the child, and there's no clue that something has changed. So if a father comes home and beats his wife and you on Fridays, you can adjust to that. You know what he's like when he's drunk. You know what he does when he's drunk. That's predictable. You don't like it. It's horrible, but you can handle that. If one moment he's, oh, I love you, son. You're such a wonderful son. You're everything I ever wanted. And then 30 seconds later, he's bashing you across the head, calling you names. And that is what drives literally kids crazy, because they don't see the clue where it's coming from. If mom gets in one of those depressive moods or hyperactive manic moods, that's when I got to watch myself, because if I do one thing, she's going to go crazy and scream at me or beat on me. So kids can adjust to that. What they cannot adjust to is the inconsistency, because they never know whether you're coming or going, whether you're going to be the good mom, the bad dad, whatever. So yeah, that is the worst for a child's well-being, and it can push them into schizophrenia. It would be more likely to push them into schizophrenia if they had a genetic predisposition, the bio side of biopsychosocial, but that only occurs in maybe 85, 87% of people who end up becoming schizophrenic. So that tells you that around 15%, there's no genetic connection at all. So what does that tell you? The social side and the psychological side is the one that's driving schizophrenia, and not some genetic predisposition. And by the same token, you can have identical twins, exactly the same DNA. One of them can be schizophrenic and one of them's not. Well, you would think, obviously, there's a genetic predisposition to become schizophrenic because one of the twins did. True. What about the other one? Not schizophrenic. Well, he or she had a different social and psychological experience than their identical twin. And they didn't become schizophrenic, and they were, as the book uses the word, resilient. They were more resilient, and they could deal with their life better than others. Number 20, if a family is moving to a dangerous area of the world, the text suggests that it might be best to do what? Well, to adopt a rigid, rule-oriented parenting style. So if you were moving to Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, your parents would do well to change their normal, loving, authoritative parenting style and act a little more authoritarian, but it's for your own good because there's a lot of dangers out there, dangers you don't have to worry about so much here in El Chuco town. Matter of fact, question 25, the answer is C, resilient. And Talia is 25. Talia grew up in an impoverished home and was abused as a child. Yet now she is a loving, successfully married and leading a middle-class life. The developmental science label for Talia is resilient. Some kids are more resilient than others. Some of it has to do with anatomical, physiological, genetic issues. Some of it just has to do with a skill set that maybe they learned somewhere. And that's what I talked about last time we were together, about having that little window of opportunity with a child, and you could show them something that not all adults beat them or make fun of them or try to take advantage of them. So that could teach them a very valuable lesson that could make the difference between a failure and a successive life, just because they had somebody they could rely on. 27, which child is most likely to be resilient? How about A, Eloise, whose parents abandoned her? Well, that sounds horrible. Well, yeah, it is. But who has a close, caring relationship with relatives. That gets back to the old attachment. It doesn't have to be mom to be attached to. It doesn't have to be dad to be attached to. It can be somebody else. And as long as you're attached to somebody successfully, you can do well. 31, children's temperament. And remember, temperament is set at birth. Children's temperament shapes parenting styles. This statement will be made by who? Someone that understood biopsychosocial, or in this case, C, behavioral genetics researcher, somebody who understands genetics and the fact that you as a child have biopsychosocial and your parents have biopsychosocial. So your interaction with your parents, that affects your social side and it affects their social side. And it affects your psychological side and it affects their psychological side. That's why I mentioned kids that have medical problems, colicky, or whatever. That's a biological problem, but it leads to a psychological problem and a social problem, because nobody wants to be around a child who's crying all the time when they're not asleep, and there's nothing you can do to console them because they're in pain, they're in discomfort. And if they get behind in socialization, which they certainly will, I mean, most younger kids, 0 to 1 may not be doing that much socialization with other kids and whatever. But the point is, if you enter life or early childhood, 3, 4 years old, and you're already got a compromised interpersonal style of dealing with others, then your peers know that, and they shun you. They don't want to be around you because you're always crying and whining and taking toys and being abusive and aggressive and all that kind of stuff. And so all the good things that you can learn from socialization, you're behind because people don't want to socialize with you because of the way you act. So it's an interactive. It's not just biopsychosocial for you, it's biopsychosocial for everybody else in your social life. So like Jeannie, who is functionally intellectually disabled, she probably could have been at least of normal intelligence and functioning if she hadn't been abused so much or neglected, I guess would be a better word. But yes, she had that personality that was even unspoken because she didn't speak that much. And she could communicate with a kid around her age walking out of a toy store. Bam. He assessed, wow, this kid is really needy. I'm going to give her this truck that I've been working for the last 3 months. Just an unbelievable story. And when you watch that film, watch about all the people drawn to Jeannie to try to help her. Now, the callous part of you might say, they just wanted part of the grant. They wanted some money. Well, some of that's true. That is a motivator. But if she was an ugly little kid that they just didn't feel very confident that there was any warmth that would ever occur, they might say, nah, I'm not really interested in working with them. Thank you, but no, thank you. Judith Harris questions. I'm not going to put any Judith Harris questions on the exam. I only got 20 questions. I don't want to worry about her. Some of the things she says make sense and some of it doesn't. So very easy decision. Eliminate her off the test. Number 45 has to do with U.S. parents reporting spanking their children. Answer A, sometimes. The book made you think that it was, most parents said no, never. Not true. Now here's one I want you to think about. Question 48. Which U.S. group is not at risk of frequently using corporal punishment? Answer C. People who live in the Western states, like us. Woohoo! Now, why is that true? I don't know. I was born and raised in a Western state called Nuevo Mexico, and my parents used corporal punishment wrongly, in my opinion, still. Like I said, I'm not anti-corporal punishment. I'm unjustly used punishment, whether it's sitting in a chair, timeout, taking away your video games or access to the computer, your cell phone. In my day, this you will like, I think. In my day, the way Hispanic parents used to punish their daughters, especially when they were in that age, 12 to 18, they would take their hairspray away from them. Because in those days, all the girls wanted their hair all bouffant and all fancied. In order to make it stay there, you had to use hairspray to stick it up there. So if they misbehave, you take away their hairspray, they can't do squat like they want to with their hair. They just have to leave it hanging. So then they go to school and they compare themselves to their peers and, ask your parents that one. Ask your parents that one. Ask your parents whether they used or their parents used that as a punishment. Take away your hairspray. Little cross-cultural learning here could help us. All right, Victoria, do you have any questions based on my ramblings or anything else?
No, I don't think so, sir.
Well, thank you for being patient throughout these stories. And I don't know if I can pump out another song while we're waiting here. I don't know. Does it seem to? Oh, it's a John Prine one. All right. This is The Glory of True Love. I love this song. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow at 10. Exams this weekend. Take care. Be safe. Love all you guys. Bye-bye.
For the glory of true love is a wild and precious thing.
Yes, it is.
It don't grow on old magnolias.
It only blossoms in the spring. Know the glory of the true love.
It will last your whole life through. Never will go out of fashion. Always will look good on you.
Always look good on you. Take care.
You can climb the highest mountain,